Cachamaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
For the Bad Cop and special guest Clay Jar, I'm Daryl W4 back for the 84th installment of the GeoGearHeads. We're glad you could join us as we discuss changes in geocaching brought about through technology. I'm sure this will be another one of those great conversations, so we want to get to that right away, but here's a reminder of some of the topics coming up.
We do have some great shows coming up. Next week, both Daryl and I are excited to be talking with Ben Dodson of Wallaby. That's one of those games that have roped in the two of us and many other of the GeoGearHeads. Then, episode 86 will be from the Leave No Trace organization. We have some more shows in the planning that we know you'll love, including the next randomized show. So if you have anything you want to be included in any of those shows, give us a call at 206-350-3647. That's our voicemail line. Or you can email us directly at geogearheads@cachamaniacs.com.
Yeah, we actually have some people already submitting stuff that we're going to use on the next randomize, so make sure to get that stuff in.
Love it. But
as you remember, on the last randomized edition, we got some information from one of our listeners, Nighthawk700, about that 07, and I just caught a post today that the 07s have dropped in price officially to $79 for the LT and $129 for the Pro. So now that becomes a really darn cheap unit for anyone who's looking for that. And remember, the Pro is the one that you want to get as a cacher because it has the GPSR.
I just can't imagine how they can drop the price anymore. It's almost becoming an impulse buy.
Oh, absolutely. It's for that kind of price, the $80, it's something that you can, kind of just say, well, why would I get a MP3 player for the kids? I'm going to get this thing.
Right. They can do a little surfing. Anyway, if you need to know more information about that, we talked about it in episode 82. Now, if you're in the Great Northwest, like I am, didn't know if you knew that, and heading to the Groundspeak block party, be sure to stop by the GeoGearHeads booth. Just for our listeners, we have a special giveaway. Stop by the booth and say the phrase that pays, "I'm a GeoGearhead," and you'll get a special edition Cachamaniacs GeoCoin. Now, supplies are limited, so you better get there early if you want to get one of these coins.
Well, tonight we have Clay Jar joining us again, and you'll probably recognize him from episode 71 on scuba caching. So, Clay Jar, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Now, you've been caching longer than either Daryl or I. I started in in 2004. Yeah, see how late it was? It was 2004. And Daryl started in August 2005. So, Daryl, happy 8th cachiversary.
Hey, thanks, Bad Cop.
You're welcome. But, Clay Jar, you've been caching since, what, May of 2001?
May 29th is when I signed up.
Wow, impressive.
So you pretty much have seen it all.
Yes.
Or at least for geocaching, you've seen it all.
Yeah, there you go.
What else is there?
Yeah, the world revolves around geocaching, right? Or, well, maybe the world revolves around the satellites.
Ooh.
I think it's the other way around.
Yeah, I kind of hope so, actually.
Aren't they locked in position in relation to the Earth?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think they actually are.
Okay. So they're not in geosynchronous orbit?
No.
The constellation does move?
Yeah, it actually, I'm 90% sure the constellation is not stationary because I remember them reconfiguring the constellation every so often, and as I recall, that's why they need the almanac data in the GPSRs is to keep track of where the satellites were and where they're expected to be so that they can get the lock quicker.
Okay.
Correct.
That makes sense.
That's something that we'll have to try to still, we've been trying to find a expert who can talk with us and let us know about all of that kind of stuff for one of the shows. But unfortunately, that's been a little bit tougher than you might think.
We actually need a rocket scientist.
Yes, we do. However, that does bring up probably the thing that's affected caching more than anything else, which is the GPSRs, those little handheld units, have gotten so much better than when you started. Clayjar, we were talking a little bit beforehand, and you were saying that one of your buddies had one of those really early GPSRs that had all kinds of problems. And it was a chore just to get it to connect to the computer, even to do a firmware upgrade.
Well, yeah, one of the early Magellans that was around when I started only displayed 2 digits after the decimal point, because back before they, turned off the, selective availability, which is what made it so that you couldn't see exactly where you were, there was no need for it. Mm-hmm. And so they turned that off, and you'd only know how close you were to, 2 digits. Not useful for caching. But
no.
They came out with the firmware update, but nobody had cables back then. Why would you buy an expensive cable? Because all you'd use it for is firmware updates, and well, eventually you could use. I used mine for loading maps, which, yeah.
I was going to say my first one wouldn't allow for maps. And it did have a cable, but it was only like 4 channels. And this is one of the things that I still remember from when I first got into geocaching. That's not the unit I used for geocaching, thank goodness. It was a huge brick of a unit, 4 channels. It had to scan for like 15 minutes to get a lock, and you couldn't turn it off, or it would take 15 minutes again to find the GPS or find the satellites, because it only had 4 satellites it could talk to at any given time. But when I first got started in geocaching, they made a big deal. You need to have a GPS that has 12 channels.
Mm-hmm.
I splurged when I got mine, and so I not only had 12 channels, but I had maps, and it could have almost an entire state loaded at once.
Well, this is one of those things. Who even talks about how many channels a GPSR has anymore?
Actually, I think I've seen it in marketing, but instead of talking about 12 channels or 24 channels, they're talking about this one can get GLONASS, and when Galileo comes along, you'll get even better fixes.
Yeah. They're starting to talk now about the various systems and how many of those they support. We have all of this supplemental information, like the assisted GPS stuff, which, depending on which ones it's using things like the towers for cell phones. It's using UHF transmitters for radio stations, for television, for all kinds of stuff. And this is something that wasn't even considered way back in 2001, and even in 2005. We were lucky to get good GPSRs that could do maps, and where you could actually load the waypoints in over a serial cable, and it was serial, it wasn't USB. The 60 CSX, I think, just came out about a year or two after that, so like 2006, 2007, and that was, I think, the first GPSR that was reliable with a USB connection.
Do you remember when WAAS, WAAS, the Wide Area Augmentation System, came along? Or was that before you?
Yes. No, I remember that.
I was into GPSR a little bit before I got into caching. I had my first GPSR even before Y2K. But by the time I got into geocaching, that one had long since been retired, and I had just a little Magellan Sporttrac Pro, which was quite good because it had a grayscale screen and could actually do maps, and you could put, I want to say, 200 something waypoints in it.
Well, the Sporttrac was 2 generations after my Map 330.
Yeah.
They had that, and they had the Meridians, which they actually had the color one in the Meridian. It was the first color one.
They had the color one. No, they had the color one in the Sporttrac as well.
That came after.
Oh, yeah, that might be. But yeah, they did have the Sporttrac in color.
I bought one.
See, and I remember explicitly that color version because when I was looking at getting that unit, it was like, ooh, I'd really like to have the color. And then I started reading up on it, and a lot of people were saying that the color screen was actually interfering with the accuracy of the GPS, and like especially if the backlight was on or something like that, then your accuracy was even worse than usual.
Wow.
Yeah, and considering how the resolution, on these things was, somewhere between postage stamp and Barbie camera. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and remember when we had those early Magellan units, we had that boomerang effect where you walked up to the cache, and if you stopped, it kept going, and then it would bounce back. So you had to get into this mindset of, okay, it's kind of predicting where I'm going to be, not telling me where I am, so I have to stop about 30 feet before where it says the cache is, and then I start looking.
Yeah, the Magellans always did the slingshot where you'd go past it and then come back and end up right on it. And the Garmins of, that are the classic yellow and everything, you'd walk around and your track log would look like an angry drunken bee. But when it said 0, you'd stop because you were near it. Well, okay, when it said 50 feet, you'd stop because that was about what you'd expect.
Well, and one of the things that I remember very, very vividly from the early days of caching was actually learning who the hiders were and which model GPS they were using. Anyone who was using any of the Magellans would be 30 feet east, for instance, on average. Anyone who was using an E-Trex would be 30 feet to the north, and if you had a 60, you were like 15 feet northwest of the chords. So it was like one of those, everyone had a slightly different, every one of these units had a slightly different method of figuring out its location, and those differences were pretty predictable as to where they were going to be from where they said they were, depending on which unit you had as well. So that was a lot of fun, is trying to figure out which units they had and where the cache was actually going to be.
And if it was a yellow E-Trex in the forest, you pretty much didn't know it.
Or the blue. I had a lot of problems with
blue?
the
I had the E-Trex Legend.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the forest, in the urban caverns with the buildings, same thing. You had no idea where you were.
Oh,
I
yeah.
used to use a compass a whole lot more because you'd get to a clearing, you'd sight it with the compass, and then walk that direction because once you got into the trees, your reception went bad.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, but we're talking about all this stuff, and now even with the smartphones, people are expecting that they can just walk to ground zero, to 0 feet, and they know where it is. Fortunately, with the smartphones, people know to put down the phone and just start looking because they expect some inaccuracy. But people who have these Oregons or 62s or whatever expect that they can just go to 0 and it should be right there at their feet.
In a perfect world.
Where's the fun? Well, you have all kinds of inaccuracies all over the place, but it's become so accurate with these GPSRs that it can take you back within a foot or two almost every time. And now, because of that, people have kind of lost that sense of, we have to start looking around. And I have to be honest, that's one of the reasons I like using my iPhone so much, is because of the way I use that for preserving battery, which is, okay, it's, 20 feet this direction, I'm going to walk, 20 feet and look for it. And, I turn off the screen. When I have that GPSR, I, too, have that want to just keep staring at the screen until it hits 0. So I don't have as much fun caching with the GPS because I have this need to search by the numbers rather than by instinct.
You look at it and then walk a bit and look at it. Way back when GPS receivers were not nearly as friendly as they are now, we actually had a cacher around where I live that didn't know that it updated as you moved. And so he turned it on, got a fix, looked at how far he was, turned it off, walked that direction, turned it back on, and he cached like that for quite a while before someone explained to him how GPS worked. This was before there were, 10,000 caches, so it didn't slow him down too much. But Yeah, they're a lot more friendly these days.
Yeah. I know a lot of cachers who walking around to match the numbers, not realizing there's an arrow that's going to point me in the general direction.
I guess you'd get a whole lot of
All right,
L-shaped track logs.
Oh, hold on, guys, because the connection dropped for an internal error. So, Bad Cop, why don't you take it back to it was I knew or something like that, and then that's where it cut out.
Okay. I knew of a bunch of cachers who didn't know there was an arrow in the GPS. So they would walk around looking, okay, I've got the longitude locked in, now I've got to get the latitude locked in, so where am I? I have to walk, oh, no, it's to the left. No, those numbers are going down, so I can match numbers rather than looking at an arrow to point them to ground zero.
Yeah, a lot of that, a lot of the cachers that we talked with on the early days of the Cache Maniacs original series, yeah, when they got started, they didn't even know that you could enter in a waypoint and say go to that waypoint. They thought all the waypoint was a pin on the map. And I have to admit that I couldn't figure out how to actually route when I to those first few caches, because that's all I was doing was, oh, there's an interesting spot here. I need to put it on the map so I know where that was. Then when I got into caching, it was like, oh, that's how you actually get there. Well, you know, I'm like, I'm using it to mark locations. I didn't need to go back to that specific location. I just needed to know when I went back this route, here was something interesting that we wanted to use for, you know, a photographic location or something.
Right.
But you know, that's really changed a lot with the maps, and you know, now you got the street maps where you can actually do the navigation, the topo maps, which is what I actually like on my GPSR. The satellite, which I only really use that on the phones, but oh man, that has so changed the way that we go caching. And you can even get trail maps, routable trail maps.
Yeah, I've done the trail maps, the satellite maps of for researching where you think a cache is. So much more you can do with that than you could back in 2001. I've done caches where I didn't have my GPS receiver with me, but I wanted to get a cache in that spot, and so I just looked and found one by a tree that I could recognize and went out caching the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, how many times in the early days of our caching careers did we go out looking for a first to find, and it was at work or whatever, so you go and you look at the Google map, check out the satellite view, and you just go there and based on a landmark find the cache that way.
I did it. Saw a picnic table and said that has to be ground zero, that's where I'm going to go.
I found one right outside work that way. I was at work, I got bored, I'm like, oh, there's probably a cache around here somewhere. Hey, that's outside my wall.
I had done dozens of those from work where someone published a cache midday, and it's like, ooh, I'm going to take my quick lunch break. And the worst part is, I actually had a GPS in my car. But to fire it up, get a lock, because it was that old Sporttrac, took so long that I could just check the map, go, and I knew where it was beforehand. And this is before I had a smartphone. But I had all the information, I had to look it up on the WAP interface. Remember the WAP interface?
Oh, I remember that well.
But that was a huge advancement right there. So you could go and you could get the information, you could punch it in, and so I always would grab the GPS and turn it on, leave it in the car. Usually about the time I got back to the office, it would have the lock, but. Let's kind of change and get away from the GPSRs because we've kind of beaten that to death. One of the things that I think happened because of the change in technology was the retirement of the webcam caches at geocaching.com. You remember when the webcam caches got started, the whole thing was that was a cache you had to work with someone else because you didn't have a data connection in the field. And if you did, it was so slow you couldn't load an image. And any of the portable devices were going to have problems with getting that kind of technology to work anyway. So you had to have someone at home to bring it up. Well, by the time they announced that they were retiring the caches, people had smartphones that were capable enough that some of the webcams were working, maybe not all, but you had enough of the cellular modems and that kind of stuff, and Wi-Fi was starting to become a thing. You had a lot of cities that were introducing municipal Wi-Fi, and that, I think, kind of was the end for webcams, because it's like, well, if now you can do it and not have to have a partner at their computer, what's the point of a webcam cache?
Exactly.
I still love doing them, and it's even more fun when you can sit there and stare at yourself on the screen and pose and get the right thing, or get the right look that you want. But yeah, I think that's why those went away, is because it became too easy thanks to the improved technology that we had.
Interesting. They were fun while they lasted, though.
Yeah.
Well, and there's still some out there.
There are still a few of the grandfathered ones.
Yeah, we had one in New Orleans, and Jeremy, I think it was just Jeremy, came down for some conference or whatever, and so we shanghaied him, got him to Pat O'Brien's, then walked him through the French Quarter to a webcam we knew was there, called somebody up, and I wonder what happened to that cache.
Well, and that is a problem too that we were seeing, was a lot of those were people throwing up webcams out their office windows or whatever, and they moved on and the cache wasn't archived because they got out of caching or whatever. Caches were going off, webcams were going offline, and people didn't even notice until they got there and had to write notes. And it did become a little bit chaotic because of the instability of the webcams. That was a hot thing around Y2K. Everyone was throwing up the webcams, and as the hardware died, as people realized they didn't want to pay for the bandwidth, those things started going away too. So the webcams were less available, which I'm sure was also part of the problem. But I don't think that was as much a factor, because it seemed like that was happening more after webcams were retired.
Well, there's that, and the fact that with smartphones and cameras, and pretty much every cache is a webcam cache now. You just bring your own webcam.
That's an excellent point as well. But I think that webcams were a lot of fun. I kind of miss them being there. And I kind of wish that we had a replacement for them, not just that they were retired. Right.
Even if you did them on your smartphone, they're still fun to do.
Yeah, well, and to me, the doing them on the smartphone was more fun, because you had, you didn't have to just stand in the middle of this area and talk with someone until you got a good shot of yourself. Now you can actually sit there and pose yourself. You're like, the remote photographer kind of thing, and you get a lot more interesting poses and stuff happening, because you can see what you're looking like and do your own weird, cool things,
exactly.
like the bunny ears and such that you might not be able to do otherwise.
Well, the best webcam caches were the ones that had archived, where you could go back and look at all. So you'd go there and you'd stand there for 5 minutes, going, okay, by now it probably has a good picture, and then you had to go home and hunt through it until you found yourself. And no, that's not good. No, that's not good. No, that's not good. Oh, nuts! That was the last one. Okay, I'll post that one.
Yeah.
I remember doing a webcam cache at the Alamo. I was there for a business conference, and I called a friend and said, okay, I'm there. The webcam updated its picture every 2 minutes. You stand there, okay, oh, sorry, a bus went by right when it took its picture. You know how long standing there waiting at 2 minutes, Come on.
I remember trying to do one of those when I'm standing there, and the person at the other end, 15 minutes later, goes, "Oh, I still don't see you." Oh, wait a minute. This is from 2 weeks ago. It stopped working. No! So and that's one of those ones where we grabbed a camera phone picture and sent that as our image, because it actually said right on the page, if it stops working, just take a picture of yourself at the location. And that's not as much fun.
No.
So, okay. One of the things that was a big deal when all of us got started was paperless caching. Now, I imagine, Clayjar, paperless caching hadn't even been really invented when you got into it. But
I remember when it started to be more or less sort of invented, kind of.
yeah, when it got started, it was really just kind of people taking those HTML pages and loading them into archives, and that was your paperless caching. It wasn't that big a deal. So when we got started, we were printing out pages, and there are stories about people going out with reams of paper just to go find a few caches. There's also people who would just take a notebook and write down the coordinates, because a lot of people didn't have the ability to load coords in. They had to hand enter everything anyway. So they're writing down the coordinates, they're writing down any information they needed to find the cache.
Description, hint, recent logs.
Yeah, in notebooks and journals, and taking them along, and then they'd make any notes there is for logging them. And that was the way people went caching. There was no such thing as information on the GPS. Your information on the GPS was the GC number of the cache and where it was. That's like the best you could do.
Well, paperless caching is when you forgot your binder.
Yeah, and then with GSAC, a lot of people were starting to not worry about any of the details. They'd put the GC, they'd kill the GC and put like the number in there, and then they have like T1,
D1,
yeah, D1, or they'd do like size or something like that, because that's all you could fit in, and you took that little bit of information, the pin's title, that waypoint's title, and that was everything that you would use to find the cache. You had no hints, no description. If it wasn't enough just knowing that, then you weren't caching well.
And with the early GPS receivers, it was 6 characters max.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then you got 8 later, and it was like being in heaven.
Yeah.
2 characters! I remember it was GSAC that changed my whole way of thinking. Yeah, I would put the terrain and difficulty and container size in the waypoint name, but then I could take and export the description and hints into an HTML file, load that into my Windows CE phone, and be able to scroll through there and pop up a description. I go, look at this. This is paperless caching.
Well, and there was also CacheMate was a big one for both Windows CE and for the Palm OS. And that changed everything, because you could actually load in those GPX files from your Pocket Query. But remember, there was also that pretty small window where if you were the premium member that had that ability to create Pocket Queries, you could also create a Moby Reader document, which was a little ebook that you could load on any of the PDAs at the time. I think they even had some dedicated readers you could get as well.
Yep.
But it was just an ebook that had all of the cache information, and you'd go and search to find that GC number or whatever, and then you could put your notes in there, and it created a nice little index of all the notes. So that's how we were marking our finds, was we had this ebook that we were just putting our notes in, oh, this log is wet. That was how we logged our finds. And then when we got back, we had to pull that up and manually enter in that GC number and put in all of those notes again, all that kind of stuff.
I remember Moby Reader very well. And the fun thing is that Amazon, the Kindle stuff, that's all the same format, just the newer version.
I was just going to say that. I was going to ask if anyone remembers what happened. Yeah, well, the Amazon guys bought Moby to basically turn into the Kindle format, and in the process also killed all of the software behind it that was what they were licensing over at Groundspeak, so that went away.
I remember that well.
Yeah, and guys like me were out there struggling for the solution, and that's when we turned to CacheMate and never looked back, because that was so much better anyway.
Go figure.
Well, of course, now we're like, you mean I have to have a separate unit? I can't do it in the GPSR? But I wonder if that isn't one of the reasons why I like doing the 2-device thing, is because I got used to having the geocache navigation on the screen. So I'm always navigating to that next cache on the GPSR, and then I'm using the PDA, in my case it was a Palm unit, to get all of the information and to take care of all that logging. So I kind of think that's where I got that dependency on having two screens, is because I was used to that, and I really dislike having to toggle back and forth now. And that is one of the reasons why I like having the GPSR and the iPhone when I go caching, because the iPhone is my paperless caching. Even though the GPSR has it, I prefer using the iPhone because it's a better screen, it's connected, I can upload my field notes right away, and I don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff when I get home. But I just like having the two screens.
Yeah, see, I'm still in the like having the two screens, although my first paperless caching was a handspring visor, nice black and white knockoff Palm. Worked well. 8 megs of storage.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big one.
Full text of everything. But I like the two-device thing because so far I have never broken things like my Nexus 7. I have gone through 4 or 5 GPS receivers, and those are the hiking outdoors kind that drop a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is another thing that I find, having those two devices, it doesn't stress out either one of those devices, and you tend to have better longevity of the devices, whether it's I don't tend to lose them as much, but I don't really know if I would lose one device, because the one device I do now is the iPhone, and that thing, I'm never going to leave that anywhere because it's like permanently attached. If I'm not geocaching, I'm doing Wallaby or something like that. It's constantly in my hands for some kind of location-based gaming, it seems.
Well, just don't go to a bar in San Francisco. I hear they lose them there all the time.
Oh, yeah. Now, you were mentioning the 8 megabytes, and this is another thing that's really, really changed. Remember how long it used to take to get that pocket query down? It was emailed to you, and sometimes getting that file down, especially if you were on a slow dial-up connection, would take 5, 6, 10 minutes to get 200, 300 caches in on email. Now it's instant.
Well, you forgot the part where you waited overnight for it to show up.
Well, yeah.
Then,
Right.
Everything's so much faster these days. Now, you go and between the pocket queries, which come down faster, and having a live connection with some of the apps where you don't even have to do a pocket query.
Yeah, well, and we have wireless connections now that are faster than what we had at home in the early part of the century. Even a decade ago, we probably aren't talking about wired connections rivaling what we've got wireless now. So not only and our home connections are pretty darn fast for the most part, and wireless connections now are very fast, so we're losing that dependency on having to stop by the coffee shop or home or a hotel to get that information, to load it into the GPSR. Now we can just use the smartphones, find the information, and go. We don't have to really do anything. It's now just as easy as open up that caching app, whether it be the geocaching app, Geosphere, which is what Bad Cap and I like, Neon Geo, CacheSense, whatever it might be that you prefer. It's a matter now of just opening that up and say, find the caches near me. And you'll pull down, let's say 20 caches, all within close proximity, pull up the information, including any photos or whatnot, and you just go there. There is no loading.
No.
Impulse caching is a whole lot easier now than it used to be.
Yeah,
Exactly.
well, I can't imagine being someone who's like the traveling, flying around salesman, tech, whatever, and trying to cache in the old days where you had to carry that laptop computer, which was a brick that weighed 10 pounds anyway. Carry that GPSR, stop every night, connect up all the cables, change, do all your caches, run all your pocket queries the night before so that you had them that day when you got there, load them in, go to the, it's like, now it's all on the smartphone.
Yep.
You don't have to carry anything else.
Well, and you don't even have to use the phone part of it. Used to be something that would happen pretty often. You'd be out there caching before paperless, or even once it was paperless, and you'd be missing something, and you pick up the phone and call your friend, hey, can you look up GC for me?
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times we were out on like big cache runs with some friends of ours, and we loaded the pocket queries, the day before, go out and do the run. We get there that day, we're searching for it, call up someone, and they say, oh, that was archived this morning. Now we know.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and for things like the first to finds, which we were mentioning before, now people go out, find them on the phone, they log them right there in the field. You know instantly that cache has been found. And even for things like travelers, remember when, 2008, we'll say, it wasn't uncommon that it took 2-3 weeks for a trackable to be logged.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's out of a cache that day, people are already starting to jump on them. This cache, this traveler's missing. I don't know where it went. Who has it?
It's only been a day. Give it time.
Yeah, people are traveling, and a lot of people don't want to log that they were there for safety reasons. Some people just don't get around to it still.
Mm-hmm.
You're on vacation sometimes. Let it go. Give it some time.
Do you remember the red and yellow Jeep travel bugs? Where if you found one, logged it, you were entered in to win the Jeep. We would sit there and watch it, watch travel bug hotels at work, refresh, is anything there? Hey, there's one there. It's been there for 3 days. Somebody just got around to logging it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it was there 3 days ago.
Yeah, exactly. But you had no idea unless you stopped.
Yeah, and now people expect that stuff to happen instantly. We're so used to the connected world now that it's expected that first to finds are going to be logged within 10-15 minutes of when the person found it. Travelers, you expect they're going to be logged within a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing that this 2, 3, 4 week lag time that used to be perfectly normal is now, those cachers get chastised for it.
Yep, exactly. You're a lazy cacher if you don't claim your finds either immediately or within the same day.
Yeah. Well, another thing that's really improved, in my opinion, is puzzle solving. Remember how tough it had been to figure out if you actually had solved the puzzle correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Well, now you've got all kinds of tools, not just, you can go and search to find a lot of the information that you want to solve those things, whether it be in the field or, at home, Googling fixes most of those problems right away. But you also have all kinds of great tools, and we actually did put a call out on Google Plus to try to get some feedback on what people are using. And at this point, there seems to be 4 tools. The big one that everyone seems to be using is, I think it was GeoChecker. I can't remember because there's 2 of them that are so closely named, and I'm drawing a blank as to which one was which now. But there's the Servitude, the Events, the GeoCheck, and the GeoChecker, and we'll link to all those in the show notes. But really, it's only the GeoCheck or the GeoChecker that anyone seems to use. And I wish every cache, even those multi-caches, I wish had this thing on the cache page now, because it's been tough on a couple of them. Is that a 4 or a 9? I can't really tell. It would be great to be able to pull that up, and we kind of expect that easy confirmation now of having something on the cache page to verify that we got the right coordinates for that next stage.
Nice thing that I like about those is it actually opens up another part of geocaching for people like me that might not go out and find all these puzzle caches everywhere, but people come to the geocaching chat, the one linked from the forums that we've been running since 2002, I guess? Yeah, 2002. But they'll come in there and say, hey, look, I can't solve this puzzle. Somebody want to give... And I don't care if it's in Berlin or Los Angeles or what. It's just fun to try to solve them if there's a checker, so I know that I've actually done something.
Right.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are doing that kind of stuff. And there had been a time where, with like the webcam caches, people were creating webcams that you could do from your home, and GroundSpeak kind of disallowed that, but you can do some of that kind of stuff. It was fun for those times when you can't get outside, and this is a new aspect to solve those puzzles. And some of the cache owners will actually tell you, if you email them and tell them, hey, I figured out your puzzle, go ahead and log it. You found the puzzle, and that's what the cache is all about. I personally am not a fan of that.
No,
but it does add a whole other aspect to caching.
I like to help. I like to figure out the puzzle so I can help the person that can't figure them out, but I don't even log a note on it. It's their find. It's not mine. You have to find the cache and sign the log. I mean,
Exactly.
It was easy when I started, right?
Yeah. That's the whole thing. Is at this point, GroundSpeak, with the exception of the Earth caches, has gotten rid of anything that doesn't have a log. So the whole thing now is really that you do have to have a log in the cache. You have to sign it then in order to claim the find. That's pretty much all there is to it. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there, guys. We'll have to do another one of these because this was a lot of fun. We have some talking points that we couldn't get to today. So, yeah, we'll have to do another one of these. And if anyone has any more of these great stories about the way things have changed over the years since they've been in caching, we'd love to hear those and add those into the next version of the show. So make sure to call those into 206-350-3647. Or, of course, you can record and email those to geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com, or even just type them up and send them into the address. And that also works for any of those upcoming shows. Next week we're talking with Ben of Wallaby. That's going to be an exciting one for a lot of us. And then the week after that, we're talking with Leave No Trace for some more information about how to leave no trace. So hopefully we'll catch everyone for those episodes and get a lot more feedback in the coming weeks.
Yeah. Clayjar, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Your expertise, your knowledge of the past is a lot of fun. It's fun to go down memory lane and remember all this stuff as the way it used to be.
Have I just been called old?
Well, I'm just a couple of years younger in caching terms. Check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by calling 206-350-3647, by emailing GeoGearHeads at cachemaniacs.com, or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniac shows coming. Please consider making a PayPal donation through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show is copyright 2013 by Daryl Wattenberg, all rights reserved.
Cache with the Cachemaniac.